Hello, everyone, and welcome to the conversation today. As you're coming in, like I said, for those who are coming in, we're going to have people trickling in as we go forward. We'd love to hear from you, your name, what you're calling in from, and what's one quality you believe matters most for leadership in today's environment. And before we dive into today's dialogue, I want to take a few minutes to kind of ground us in where we are, because this moment is we're living in and leading through is not business as usual. In fact, work across sectors is really at a breaking point, and burnout, inequity, and disconnection are defining today's workplaces. Many leaders, teams, and organizations are stretched very thin, and we're trying to do more with less. We're operating with uncertainty and with playbooks that really no longer fit the mold or the moment that we're in. But to move forward, we first need to understand the forces that are shaping this experience. So Chris, Suneet, and I describe this moment as a collision of systemic pressures, structural, social, and economic, that are pushing the limits of the systems we depend on. And let me give you an example of what this looks like. Number one, workplaces are where people feel left out or treated unfairly because they're losing trust and momentum. Outdated leadership styles are making it harder for teams to adapt and respond to change. Burnout and mental health struggles are leaving people too drained to stay resilient. Progress on diversity, equity, and inclusion is stalling often, and sometimes even going backwards. We have rising costs, and economic uncertainty are causing more financial stress and anxiety than ever before. Climate change and new technologies are bringing new risks that many organizations aren't very prepared to handle. So this is the reality we're facing right now. Many workplaces are stuck in old ways of working, too focused on control, not built for the complexity we're living in today. And so the systems we rely on weren't designed for this level of change, and many of them are starting to break down. And when that happens, people often react in one of two ways I found is number one, they try to hold on tighter and control everything, or they rush to do something new without clear direction. So clarity is not the name of the game here. And neither of these really helps us move forward in a very healthy way. They usually lead to more disconnection and burnout at the end of the day. So what we were wondering and what we're going to be looking in today is what if this moment isn't just a crisis? What if it was an opportunity and we say an invitation to build something better? So this invitation is for us to move from this chaos to clarity and connection, and to explore how we can lead this through this forcing function in ways that are more deliberate, more adaptive, and more human. So that's why we are here today. So, so as we get started, let's introduce each of us to each other. So I'm going to go first, and then Chris and Suneet, if you can give a minute or two about yourself. So I'm Amy J. Wilson. I am the founder and leader at Culture Catalyst at the Culture Shift Studio. What I help organizations do is to help them unlearn ways of working and build cultures that are grounded in emotional intelligence and well-being, and also shared success. And through different things that I do with the Culture Shift Studio, with Healing for Work, helping people overcome burnout epidemic that we're experiencing, the steps to unlearning. So unlearning what we've inherited from the workplace and from other places in the world. I get to support leaders in creating this future of work that we all deserve. So Chris, you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm Chris Gott, co-founder of Ferris Group, and we primarily deal with developing teams in high reliability organizations. So these are organizations that are preoccupied with failure, where oftentimes any kind of loss is catastrophic. So we do so through a blend of some personality science and some organizational intelligence, really framing what is the needs within the environment and then finding the right fit for the right people. That's the bulk of where we're at. Suneet, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you and some familiar faces. The way I talk about my work is I say that I help people and organizations get unstuck, find purpose, and build momentum. On the human and personal side, I do that through some frameworks I've created, one that I teach at Rutgers University, and just on how to find and evolve your purpose. When I work with organizations, I needed a program that would scale. So I certified in something called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And we'll talk a little bit about that today as a tool and a way and a system for finding harmony as you've activated innovation and motivation in your organizations. And it's great to meet you all.
Mm. Thank you for your quick introductions and for us to have some really lovely conversation today. We're going to limit people's introductions in the space here to the chat window. So if you haven't introduced yourself, please do. And one thing I love to do when I'm having gathering with other people is adding my LinkedIn profile as well, in case people want to connect, because that's what I'm also all really about. And I think Suneet and Chris would also agree that that's a great thing for us to do in this work. So let me get you started for today's journey. We'll begin with a welcome and framing, which we're in the middle of doing, and then we'll give 3 mini talks and a follow-on discussion with that. So each one of the 3 gentlemen, the 2 gentlemen, and then I will be giving this mini talks and a discussion. And finally, we'll lead a dialogue on what the story of the future might look like and give you some time for a Q&A to talk amongst each other, but also ask us questions and the larger group. And so to get us started on setting the course for what we're going to be doing today, I'll pass it on to Chris, who's going to talk about that process of collaborative inquiry.
All right. So I'm sure everyone on here has been through various amounts of webinars, lectures, and so on and so forth. One of the things that we started off with was how do we make this a dialogue and not that? There's someone I look up to immensely by the name of Dr. Preston Klein, and he often discusses the collaborative inquiry framework within mission critical teams. We're going to take that approach with this today. So what collaborative inquiry looks like, it's teamwork with a scientific twist, meaning that we are going to create open dialogue where each one of you becomes an influence in how the process gets shaped. In that, we're going to be looking for evidence over opinion. That's one of the paramount aspects of this, is that we need to rely on what the data is telling us and not our necessarily influence on the data. Amy, if you can move to my next one. There we go. Thank you. So of these, it is imperative that we make sure that we stay in the curiosity before judgment. We need to make sure, again, we've got the evidence above opinion, and everybody's voice has power in this, because we want this fully to be an open dialogue. You have influences we are unaware of, and there are going to be aspects as we move along that are going to be very impactful as you bring that forward. The other aspect is that these are not giant sweeping changes. These are things that we need to build upon. They are small movements, small developments, ideas that then get blossomed into a bigger piece as we all begin to contribute to the greater good. The reason this works is because, Amy, you want to kick to my next one?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. It allows us an opportunity to come at challenges without pre-existing answers. So we are not coming at this with a solution. We are opening up the dialogue from a question. With everyone's individual influences, it allows us to examine the problem set from multiple different lenses. We get the opportunity to develop new learning pathways for it. And ultimately, we all gain value from the capacity build that is everyone's individual perception of the situation. So as we move into it, we're going to let Amy kick it off with a discussion on innovation and how we go about it.
Mm. Thank you, Chris, and thank you for introducing us to that helpful framework. You know, in every one of our Engagements, we like to have a little bit of something that you're going to be learning and you can take away with you. So hopefully you get to take a little bit about this collaborative leadership and collaborative inquiry process. And Chris, as we were saying, you were like, Amy, you naturally do this already. So some of you already might do this too, just like that, because based on some of our tendencies. So I'm going to talk a little bit about another framework. So this is the framework that has emerged from our conversations with Chris, Suneet, and I. And today, we're going to explore this different lens, one that's grounded in this idea that innovation, motivation, and harmonization are not separate or sequential, but deeply interdependent. So I'm going to talk about all three parts of this framework first off, and each one of us are going to go deeper dive today. So number one, innovation. How can we spark new ideas that align with our purpose? Two, motivation. How do we reconnect our values with meaningful action and motivating each other? Three, harmonization. So how do we build systems that scale with care, with that clarity and connection we're hoping to have? And so each three of these dimensions represents an ongoing commitment to both your people and your organization. And think of them as the three legs of a stool. Each one is essential for the success in this kind of chaotic world that we are being thrown into. So we can learn to integrate these three dimensions while honoring the complexity of this moment. We can begin to build workplaces and leadership cultures that are not just functional, but resilient, equitable, and also built to last. So what I want to say, and from all three of us, is that thank you for showing up today, not to just consume the answers, but to co-create some insights. So this is a dialogue, and even though it's in a webinar format, we want to hear from you. And so I have the pleasure of leading us through this first segment of the mini talks that we're giving today. And I'm going to talk a little bit about innovation. I'm going to stop sharing during my piece. Give me a second. Okay. So first off, when I hear, most people hear the word innovation, they picture new products or new startups out in the world. And in my experience, when I've been doing innovation for nearly 20 years, and in government, nonprofit, large corporations, building cultures of innovation, I think the most important innovations today are happening inside the systems we already have. So not just creating new value, but creating new value within the system. And they're not just happening because people woke up one day and wanted to innovate. They're happening because necessity is forcing us to change. One thing I want to say is that 15 years ago, I was working at Booz Allen Hamilton, turning 100 years old, that company. And I was put on a team of 5 people to say, let's figure this out. What does a culture of innovation mean for the firm? And that was one of the first times where I really got to see what does that really mean in today's context, and every context is different. So let me just set the context for where we are right now. So in the last 2 years, I've seen this happening across sectors, and government agencies are facing budget cuts and workforce loss. In nonprofits, funding pipelines are collapsing. In corporate teams, there's a lot of burnout that's happening, and resilience, and I put that in air quotes, messaging that doesn't really match the reality of people in their companies. So innovation in these spaces is reinvention under pressure, over disruption. So we're figuring out how to evolve these legacy systems so they can survive this moment and serve the next moment, and the next moments that we have in our companies. And a clear example of this is what's happening around DEI efforts right now, diversity, equity, inclusion efforts right now. So many organizations launched DEI programs post 2020 with urgency. And but often they were seen as like add-ons and not necessarily structural shifts to the way things are done. But with political backlash and funding cuts, DEI is being sidelined, but often abandoned entirely or taking a right or left turn. And that's not really innovation. That is just situational changes. But there's an opportunity here for us to this DEI fatigue that many companies and organizations are feeling is forcing a deeper conversation about the systems in which we're in. So I'm seeing clients that I talk to ask, how do we move beyond training and statements to embedded equity or embedded inclusion? How do we design processes, not just programs, that truly support the inclusion we're looking for? And this, for me, is innovation born of necessity. And it also is harder work, but it's more sustainable at the end of the day. So here's some things that I've learned in my experience working with clients for the past 20 years. Not the only things, but a few things. And in times of constraint, innovation is not a luxury. It is an organizational survival skill. And it must be purpose driven. So it's tied to the organization's reason for being, people centered, not just a leadership exercise. And number three, system aware. So focused on redesigning the system, not just having new ideas. And on top of that, making sure those ideas and people feel comfortable sharing ideas and being present with each other and trusting each other. But in this moment, when you're looking at those three things, purpose-driven, people-centered, and system-aware, the challenge for leaders is to create space for this kind of reinvention to happen, even amid burnout and pressure that's happening from the outside. Because at the end of the day, if we don't do this, the system will be breaking anyway, and innovation will have to happen in a reactive way, not intentionally. And that's why what led us to this conversation today. Let's try to be a little bit more intentional about how we do this. So what I'm inviting you to consider in the next few minutes is two things. Where is innovation happening by necessity in your organization right now? And how can you help ensure it's purpose aligned and system smart, not just reactive? And Suneet's going to be helping me facilitate the chat and in right now. And Suneet, if you can drop those questions into the chat for people to reflect on. And I'll give like maybe 30 seconds or a minute for you to maybe do some free writing on that and then add that to the chat or even raise your hand if you want to speak up and share some things that's happening for you. Yeah, there, Kat, I see Booz Allen Hamilton, shout out. Good to see you, Kat. Any thoughts? Yeah, Susan, go ahead.
Hi, thanks, Amy. Good to see everybody here. Um, I'm just also wondering in this time of upheaval and such disruption too, with lots of layoffs and AI potentially replacing some jobs, et cetera. I mean, innovation can also be how do you care for your employees? I mean, your people are your organization and what can be done about, really a human-centered kind of organization, because that can make a big difference for loyalty and sustainability and reputation. So I'm wondering what you all think about that.
Mm. I would actually ask that for the room here. If there's some things I can certainly talk about it being more human centered. But does anybody have any ideas that they would like to share? Or maybe things that you're already working on? Hmm. Okay, so one thing I would say is to make it more human centered is first off, I think there's a deep awareness of what's happening right now. Like earlier today, I just posted a newsletter where most people in their workplaces are tackling uncertainty and they're tackling fear. That's like across the board. It's deeper in, say, the civic tech space and things like that. So what is the antidote? How can we address fear instead of and address uncertainty instead of brushing it under the rug? So I look at that, and if you want to go to my website for LinkedIn, you can actually follow. I'm doing a two-part series for this, and I just did this conversation with people in the federal government and other change makers. And on one side, it's uncertainty, and the antidote to uncertainty is for us to have to be curious and to go deeper into curiosity, and be curious about ourselves and how we're showing up right now, and curious about other people and how aware of how other people in the organization is showing up. Then it's also capacity. So the capacity to know that we have gone through hard times before and we can get through it again, that we can lean on ourselves, but also more importantly, each other. That's the connection piece. And then the other piece, I'll give you a sneak peek of what's going to be coming with the antidotes next week. The second session I led was about fear. So if you're in a place of fear, what is the antidote to that? And that is connection and also clarity that happens in there. And also there's a third C that I can't remember right now, but in the end of the day, like what we're trying to do is like, if you're in a fearful state, how can you connect with each other to know that I'm not alone here? I actually can, we will get through this together. It's going to be rocky, but at the same time, like I'm fearful I might lose my job. I'm fearful that a lot of things might be happening, insert whatever experience you want to have there. So there's a lot of fear out there. So if you name it and you allow people to grieve and to talk about loss, then that makes a big difference. So Sunny, you're talking about reinvention. So Sunny, do you want to talk for a second about what's happening with you with reinvention?
Yeah, so I was just responding to the prompts that Suneet put in. So, innovation currently happening in our organization definitely is AI, right? So we're seeing all the various platforms coming out across the board, whether it be, chat, Perplexity, Google just dropped theirs, Claude, right? So it's hitting us and then it's learning. So it's getting really curious about like right now we're in a learning phase of
Mm,
immersing ourselves in all of this new emerging tech to figure out what makes sense for the business and what's going to bring, the best solutions for our agency, but for our clients as well. I think
mhm,
the second part of that prompt is what part of the system or process is in need of reinvention. So, there's a lot that's being thrown at us. For us, it's really for me as a visionary CEO is looking at building the agency of the future and what does that look like? That's really setting the agency up for success.
mhm,
AI being one component of that, really. So, as a leader, you need to look at all aspects of the business to really reinvent the way in which we're going to market amidst everything that's coming at us, right? And so it definitely is a challenge. There's definitely room for innovation. I think, Amy, to your point, there's some of it might just be leaning into some of the existing systems versus trying to fix it all. Um,
mhm, mhm,
but there's a lot. But,
mhm,
a lot of change also provides entrepreneurs with an opportunity to look at things in a new way.
mhm.
So that's a lot of the
Great.
reinvention
Yeah.
piece that we're dealing with at Xavier.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing, Sunny. And something you said was entrepreneurship. I also, on the other side of the coin, is intrapreneurship, right? That was a big thing that we did in our Booz Allen days was how do you make people take those entrepreneurial ideals and turn it in and bring it in internally, like lean startup, agile, human-centered design. So thank you for sharing. And I see some other folks who put some stuff in the chat, but in interest of time, I'm going to pass it over to Chris to do his mini talk and conversation around motivation.
Thanks, Amy. Appreciate that. All right. So I get the fun aspect of talking about motivation. I often have seen motivation illustrated as a catchphrase with a symbolic image or an influencer spouting some pithy quote. However, in my experience, motivation is typically displayed when there's no right answer, when the path is uncharted, and when the odds are uncertain. In that gray space of the unknown, we begin to come to face with the reality of what motivation actually looks like. In that ambiguity, our resolve gets tested. I often see the question that people face: do we wait out the storm? Do we shrink from that uncertainty? Or do we take action? Do we rage against the dying light? Primarily, I work with teams that face uncertainty at every turn. Their environments, there's a never-ending search for what motivates an individual to not only endure, but also to build a capacity for success. And I see a lot of similarities in the landscape of society today. There's so many uncertainties at the moment. The changes that we see in staffing, job loss, restructuring, scarcity in funding, market fluctuations, and even the larger lens of the geopolitical instability. In these motivations is typically, or in these moments is where we see motivation typically start to wane. And just as Amy mentioned, the necessity often creates innovation. Uncertainty allows us to examine and strengthen our motivations. The easy answer is to wait out the storm and hope it'll be all right. But that only amplifies the uncertainty and multiplies the difficulty of maintaining the motivation. So I ask you, what if we look at this challenge of the unknown as an opportunity to redefine our outcomes, to align our actions with our values, and to define our intentions? I have found that it's within those small moments of control that's where we begin to fan the flames of motivation again. Typically speaking, it's not the grand gestures or the Hail Marys, but in the small choices made in the micro moments that allow us to build that capacity. It's in the decision to take action when it's unclear, to redefine the standard of achievement into attainable goals, and to celebrate the potentially mundane. A lot of the conversations I'm having with leaders, individuals, and teams is around how do we redefine success and begin to take action with intention when that pathway is unclear. The uncertainty of defined outcomes often leads to that intention without action, to where we begin to solve problems that we may not have a roadmap for, but we fail to put in gear the actual actions necessary to move forward. Oftentimes, the ambiguity of the situation creates a significant external pressure for the individuals involved, and we can alleviate some of that by creating some attainable goals. But ultimately, we're battling against the burnout that happens when we don't have clear paths. And so I've found with most of the organizations I interface with that as we begin to really drill down into intended outcomes and expectations, we find that we reignite individuals' agency and ability to move forward. So I say all that to say, how do we look at keeping those around us motivated as leaders and maintaining what the direction looks like? So I'm going to ask that we examine two questions. What are the current factors in your organizations or sectors that are contributing to your uncertainty? And then outside of that, what are the actions that are being taken to address those uncertainties? There'll be two additional questions popped into the chat that we can kind of get at, and we will pick apart. So by all means, feel free to choose any of those and we'll drill into it. All right. Beulah, do you want to move forward on your agency and action comment? Kind of expand upon that?
Just riffing or relative to your prompt?
Uh, Either or.
I mean, I love everything that you were just talking about because I think like so many times uncertainty keeps us paralyzed and we just look and we start freezing up and like we get tunnel vision, everything narrows, we have less and less, you know, motivation, but also just like we see less and less paths forward. And so I think what's beautiful about having like a high agency mindset is like you're widening your aperture of what's possible to like get out. You're not just like curled up in the corner, you know, crying, you know, of the escape room, like you're finding the key, you're like getting yourself out. And I think a big part of that is, you know, that what is it? I can't remember the guy that wrote Getting to Yes. He has this great sort of framework where it's like go up to the balcony. And that's how in those moments you actually see the full landscape of what's available to you. And I think nothing is more motivating or empowering in those moments is to realize you're never backed against a corner with no options. It's that usually your vision is so tunneled in that you just aren't seeing something because if you're only seeing the most obvious option, you aren't thinking hard enough or you're too paralyzed. So I think like agency plus action, which gives you confidence, like you can regain any sort of lost momentum. And so I think like that's just beautiful. I don't know. I don't know if that adds
I
anything.
No, I appreciate that, and that's exactly the spirit in which we want to keep moving this forward as we expand upon these discussions. Is what does your lens in this environment look like? So I appreciate that immensely. I see there's a question of AI, and this is always the prevalent topic. So let's expand upon that. What is the uncertainty you see in AI right now within your sector?
Uh, Thanks, Chris. I'm deeply involved in AI. I'm in the software engineering sector, but also healthcare, so I'm a little bit shielded from most of it. But what I do see at the macro level is AI is very impactful. People are scared. Folks are losing jobs. AI is just going to get better and smarter, and that is fearful for a lot of people. And I empathize with that. I think that's true. On the flip side, though, I have seen AI be a great enabler as well, both at work and outside of work. And that is, we now have tools as normies to go and build things that we want to. And I kind of look at it as folks were able to use YouTube as a platform to create voices and content for themselves and monetize that. This is now that for applications and beyond, where you can build things not having a deep knowledge of technology. And I think that for me is what I've seen the most inspiring thing. I've seen young people, old people, all walks of life build ideas and be creative and be able to actually bring those things to life. And I think there's huge, huge motivation in doing that. And I've seen people do that in personal, but also at work. Like there might be things that have been on a backlog for forever, where
Hmm.
somebody could pick it up that might even be non-technical and actually address a problem. And that impacts everybody and the motivation on the team. Like, hey, if they're willing to do it and build something, we can all do this together. So I say AI and AI is an answer for both, but that's the pros and cons of what I've seen.
I couldn't agree further with that. And I think one of the things that I often get into discussions around AI is that it's a change. We don't get a vote on whether or not that change is happening. It's going to happen. And so it's a matter of how do we accept that change? Do we push against it or do we find a way to adapt to it? And AI is very much like you said, it's going to change the landscape of business regardless of how we receive it. The best option I see from a leadership standpoint is really to begin to enable people with the pathways to allow AI to amplify what their skills are. And I see a lot of differentiation right now in the market in the ones who are embracing it and really running after it and trying to figure out how they can amplify versus the ones who are kind of playing chicken little with it, in which the sky is falling and they're not adapting to it. It's we don't get a vote on whether or not it's here. All we get a vote on is whether or not we adapt to the change. All right.
Chris, I think we're we're almost at time to switch over.
Thank you.
But one thing I would say is that maybe we'll keep monitoring the chat and responding in that. So thank you.
I'm happy to contribute to this question. I don't know if
Yeah. Dror, if you have a short thought that comes with it, please add your thought, Dror, and we can also
so.
go.
I'm on the board of Social Venture Network, and our members are dealing with cuts in funding or freezes in funding or funding disappearing and then showing back up again. Some of them are nonprofits, and they're looking out to maybe their status as nonprofit will be, including Social Venture Network, will be taken away. So these are the uncertainties, which are pretty foundational. And our response at this moment is just to get together, share information with each other, and also a kind of a needs and offers market situation. So here's what I can do for you. Here's what I need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Dror, for seeing that, and you're having that wide swath of different projects that are working, different startups and companies that you're working with. So I love that perspective. Thanks for sharing. Okay. Okay. Suneet, we were just back channeling here. Like if there's energy here, we can go for a few minutes longer if other people want to bring that in here. Any other reactions to what Dror were saying, or other folks were saying on this topic? Okay. Okay, Susan, go ahead.
Well, I teach a course at Columbia University, and of course, with the use of AI and all the different iterations of that, we do tend to have a policy. It's really up to the instructors to decide about the use of AI. And it's really hard, and you don't want to be monitoring students on that. It's very, very challenging to do that. So, where is the critical thinking, the original thought, if students are able to just submit papers and other kinds of written materials using AI? Where's their original thought?
Mm. Really interesting thought, Susan, something that came up in conversation recently with, I'm really embracing AI, and also helping other people kind of work on their prompts and how to think about training your large language models and AI. And one of the things that I would add to that is AI plus experience is a winning combination. Having that experience. But if you are using AI without experience, like it's good to test it out, but that is something that I would offer too, is like having parameters. But you also, when you're creating an AI policy, you don't want to necessarily create a policy that is very restrictive. So those are some things that I'm adding on there too. Okay. All right. Great. Yeah. Suneet's is giving a +1 to meet.
Yes. I give them a +100, but I'm limited with the interface. Susan, I would love to connect with you at some point and talk about AI in the classroom. I do teach a couple classes at Rutgers, and I'm leaning into teaching my students how to use it. And one area I've seen original thought thrive is when we allow it to be about their own self-awareness. And it is something that AI still can't quite grasp and present authentically, is your individual human experience. And they actually tend to filter it even more aggressively, because if it's someone else's words, you're happy to cut and paste. If it's about you and your story and AI doesn't get it absolutely correct, it's amazing how vigilant people will be to try and capture and tell that story accurately. So you start training them in a better sense of self-awareness to then use the tool. So I'd love to talk to you about that at some point.
That would be great. And I would just concur that, a lot of the prompts are about their own experience that they have to bring in. And also they've got to refer to the readings and the materials. And so, and really do their own analysis. And so that probably does get a little bit trickier with AI. So Suni, yeah, I'd be like to do that, like to connect with you.
Let's do it. That's great.
Thank you.
Amazing. I will pick up and take it from here. Give me a moment, folks. I am on vacation with my family in the Dominican Republic. About 10 feet there are my children splashing around in a pool. So anytime I look at over there, it's out of jealousy for them. So appreciate you. I want to thank Amy and Chris. We all connected at DC Tech and Startup Week, and amazing conversation, and decided to do this just as an experiment to start conversation. We were hearing our clients come through all this, and each of us has a different perspective. And so this model is something we've created and started in draft, and also would love feedback and perspective on it. But in the idea of leadership in the age of upheaval, it's important. We talk about innovation not just as an event, but innovation as a value. And we talk about motivation not just as an option, but as a foundation. And one of the words that kept popping up in the chat was this idea of deliberate intention. Chris said it a number of times as well. And so we wanted to add this piece of harmonization, which is, as much as you do on the innovation motivation side, you have to be intentional about how you get those pieces to orchestrate, come together, and harmonize. And there's this great Russian fable from Ivan Rylov, I believe, and it tells a story of a swan, a pikefish, and a crab. And there's a cart that they've been asked to move. It's on wheels. And so each of them tethers themselves to the cart, and then they go off and play to their strengths. And so the swan starts to fly, the pike starts to swim in a different direction, and the crab starts to amble sort of back and forth. They're all playing to their strength. They're all exhausted by the work that they're doing, and the cart remains unmoved. And the critical point of the story is that for all of the strengths and all the energy you bring to a situation, you will find yourself exhausted if you are not in alignment and intentional about the direction that you are moving. And so the first question I have for you is, think about the team that you work with. And I want to ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well aligned is the team that you work with today? And 1 would be not at all aligned, and 10 would be fully aligned. And if you can pop those in the chat, I'll give everybody just 30 seconds. Almost got an 11. I'm not surprised. 7.5. 8. Should see 15 or so more. Another 15 seconds or so, folks. Okay. 7 to 8 on the alignment side. It's average. That's what we're seeing here as well. Kristen, I see a 6. Amit, can I ask you to share why 11? What do you think you can teach us about that 11? What can we learn from you about that 11?
So I've had the privilege of building the team from scratch and able to hire to specific strengths, but also keep a common culture and goal and intentional goal in place. And because of that, we work really well together. We're all understand the entire scope of things, but we are able to go off into our little spaces and use our strengths, but in the right direction. So I could be using my strength this way, another one could be using this way, and you're not moving the cart. But if we're both going the same direction, that has been super helpful. We can parallelize things and get things done faster. So we're just all in alignment at the macro, but also at the micro and strength level.
Excellent. Kristen, can I ask you to share about the 6? I think that's vulnerable, and I appreciate you doing that. Is there anything on your mind about that 6? Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. So there's something about designing and building that team. So, and I think Kristen, your point is you're running something, and it's, it's been a family business as well, right? There's a lot there. So you are turning it around as you build it. And I think it's fair. I appreciate your honesty of saying, hey, it's a 6 right now, but I'm going to build it to something more. So as we go through it, one of the tools I want to give you all, I think one thing we want to do is make sure this was actionable. One of the things I do is a system called EOS, so an EOS implementer. And what this framework does is it allows you to take whatever organization you're building, and it gives you an incredibly powerful way to get on the same page. And I know we have some EOS fans here. I know Alex is an EOS fan. I know Sunny is an EOS fan. But the thing I wanted to give you, and we'll send this out after, is as you're building that team and as you're getting alignment, there's this incredibly powerful document. It's called the Vision Traction Organizer. And it allows you to get very literally everyone on the same page in your organization. And single page front and back. But what's powerful to me is that this is used by hundreds of thousands of organizations. And the most important thing that they agree to is you start with your values. And so as you think about harmonization, as you think about work and operating in times of upheaval, the most important thing you can do if you want to all be like that 11 is get really clear on your values, get intentional, get clear about your values. And what that allows you to do is just come into greater harmonization. So if innovation is a project, it's going to be treated very differently than if innovation is a value. Similar, if motivation is an event or an item or a quarterly check-in versus a value, it's going to be treated differently. And you're going to use it to run and manage and operate your organization or your team differently. And so as a takeaway from the few minutes of airtime that I have with you, if you find yourself at a 6, a 7, an 8, or you simply find yourself at an 11 but feel like you're capable of a 12, I highly encourage you to go through this exercise with your team. Do it for yourself, do it with your team as a powerful way to literally get everything you're trying to do on a single page as an actionable item. So one thing I want to ask is I'm going to give you all 2 minutes, 3 minutes of space. And I want to ask, what is one thing you can do immediately to build stronger alignment and harmonize with your team? So I want you to write something down. One thing, pick a team, pick a project, pick an area where you're operating. And I want you to think of one thing you can do immediately, intentionally, to build stronger alignment. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. I should see people writing. One thing. If you want to share it in the chat, excellent. If it's personal and you don't feel comfortable doing it, just wrote, done. So we know that you did the exercise and took the space for yourself.
Hey, Suneet, when Kristen said, have them set personal goals.
Yeah. And I think that have them set personal goals is powerful. What you want to be mindful of in an organization, Kristen, and I would love other folks to chime in, is you want to make sure it's not just about the company's goals. It's not just about your team's goals. It's about the intersection and alignment of those goals. So giving them some clarity on the goals you are using to run your business is going to help them figure out what personal goals and priorities they want to set in align with those. And so that's something I would encourage. That simple tool that I showed is a great way to do that. A great way to do it. I love that. Check-ins, make time, reach out and schedule. Amit, go for it.
Yeah, I'd like to share an exercise we did recently-ish, but
Mhm.
enough to that adds to values and harmonization. So, um, I use the guise of annual review, which I'm against, but we have to
Mhm.
kind of do them, or quarterly reviews, whatever it was. And I had everybody enter three strengths and three areas you could use help in, and align that with the goals of the company. Everybody had their individual goals, and then we sat on a round table. This is very Simon Sinek style, by the way, where everybody got to add to the strengths and the we'll call them weaknesses, but things that can be improved upon. And I created one large document. People did write-ups about themselves, and I put it all into Notebook LM from Google, and I created a podcast. And it was quite astonishing, like how it highlights everybody and gives their strengths and where they can use improvement and who can help them. It was pretty much a game changer, and then that became sort of a internal place to go ask questions about values, but who could help me about with things. And that was really sort of a unifying little exercise we did. So if you have access to those tools, I encourage it.
Yeah, turning the AI that Sunny mentioned and some of those tools out there into that personal
Hmm.
coach, as long as you feed it and fill it with the stuff that makes you
Hmm.
and matters to you, can be
Yeah.
incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful.
I've taken your class, and I've
I know.
gotten the output of that, and also in one of these Notebook LM things, along with my resume, along with other exercises I've done around personal growth, and
Yeah.
that's my like go-to thing where I chat about myself and ask things, and I update those documents on a frequent basis, and it's a great place to like check in with yourself 5 years ago, check in with yourself, 5 years from
Yeah.
now, and it's great. So I
Ah,
encourage folks to use these tools.
I appreciate you, bud. Thank you for sharing that. I know how seriously you take this work, so I appreciate it. Want to go back to this, I think, from a model perspective as we wrap up. A couple of things about this model, sort of in draft. One, Amy talked about it. They all are critical legs of the stool and pillars of the stool. The second thing is it's not linear. All of these things exist in your organization all the time. So there is space for innovation, motivation, harmonization. And you can enter this at any point. So today you can say the most important thing for me is innovation, or getting everybody aligned and in sync and harmonized is important. You can enter this at any journey, depending on your organization, what's relevant to you. And the last part is it's not linear, even in its progress. We saw this as a progressive spiral, which means that there'll be moments where you double backs and you relapse and you move forward. The journey is not linear. So it's cyclical within the model and progressively spiraling in greater context. The single most powerful way to persevere and sustain is to align on what makes you and matters to you. And it's all the research, decades of research highlights the fact that if you are self-concordant, which means you are aligned with your values, your ability to persevere, sustain, and move forward increases. If you are aligned and you are using your values to choose what you prioritize and what you work on, similarly, you will persevere, you will sustain. There are other things that you can do in moments of upheaval to make progress, but some of them require other people, social accountability. Some of them are not sustainable, which is just grit and brute force and effort. You'll burn out if you do that. But the one that is self-generated is simply getting clear on what makes you, what matters to you, doing that for you, your team, and your organization, so you can then harmonize and prioritize and move forward. There's a great story I'll close with. Dashrath Majan was in the 60s, he was a gentleman who lived in a small village in India. His wife got very sick, and the closest hospital was 40 miles away on foot over a mountain. There's no way. You had to go around this mountain to get to this. And his wife passed away. She could not get the care she needed. They couldn't traverse that distance, nor could anyone in that village. Quickly thereafter, he got a chisel and a hammer. And 22 years, he chiseled a road from his village to that hospital and that community on the other side. He did it by himself. He persisted. And 22 years later, His entire village now has a 5 mile commute to that village to those services. And he did this, I believe, from like 1960 to 1982. Um, this is an incredible act of innovation, if you think about it. This is an incredible tribute to motivation. But his hands in sync together are the perfect act of harmonization. And so as you think about where your organization is, when you think about whatever mountain is in front of you, right, you should think about Dashrath Majan, the mountain man of India, as they call him, and his ability to chisel a road into a mountain with nothing but his hands, a hammer, and a chisel. With that, I will turn it back. I know we're just about at time. Amy, do you want to bring us home on the coming up next?
Yeah, for sure. So, this is thank you, Suneet. Thank you, Chris, for participating and everyone else for giving their thoughts and wisdom in the session today. This is just the start of several conversations we're going to be having. So from now for the next few months, for every other week, we're going to be going deeper in each one of the topics. So I will be leading a discussion on July 1st. And then Chris will be leading a conversation on motivation on July 15th. And Suneet will be on July 29th. And then we'll have a closing session to kind of share the wisdom and be with each other in mid-August. And so I will drop the link to the chat to sign up for them. For the Zoom link, you can sign up for one or all of them at the same time. I'll drop them in the chat as we close out. Suneet, is there? I think we're right at time, so we're gonna drop in the contact us. This is how to contact each one of us. You can also reach us on LinkedIn. I will stay on. I think Suneet and Chris, if you can, also will stay on and answer any questions you might have. And I would just want to say from the bottom of my heart, and Chris and Suneet, I'm sure you share this sentiment. Thank you for being here and taking time out of your day to have this conversation with us. Give me a minute as I get the link. Don't leave before the link comes. Ooh, let me find it. Hold on.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Good to meet you all.
Okay.
Likewise.
Here is the link, the Zoom link. We'll follow up with an email with everyone with the recording and some takeaways from the session today. And, again, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, folks. Okay.
Okay.